support for us. It's my pleasure now to introduce the moderator for today's event. He is the Senior Fellow and Director for U.S.-Japan Programs at the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. He just flew in from Washington, D.C. Please give a big round of applause to Mr. Daniel Bob.
Thank you, Doug. And thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it. We're Sasakawa Peace Foundation is delighted to be able to underwrite today's program on Japan's impact on Southern California and the importance of Japan to the United States and vice versa. This conference allows us to showcase a research project on that very subject, which was funded by our sister organization in Tokyo, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation in Tokyo, carried out by our friends at the East-West Center. Now, while the title of the project, Japan Matters for America and America Matters for Japan, will not come as any great surprise, I think, to the members of this audience, it's really no secret that interest in Japan among Americans has dropped precipitously since the late 80s and early 90s, when Japan's economic success was on the front pages of newspapers on an almost daily basis, and a focus of attention among policymakers in Washington and the American public alike. It's important to remember, of course, that much of that interest was actually negative, derived from problems in the bilateral relationship, particularly over trade frictions. And at the same time, there was also a general sense, an unease, that perhaps Japan was on a trajectory to overtake the United States economically and become the world's largest economy, also perhaps showing that America's best days were behind it. Now, much has changed over the ensuing 20 years when it comes to views of Japan. Bilateral trade frictions declined significantly. Japan's economy entered into a period of prolonged stagnation, and interest in Japan among Americans, government officials, policymakers, the public at large, seemed to wane. Simultaneously, there was a tremendous increase in interest in China and that country's economic rise and its global aspirations. In fact, it's become something of a preoccupation in Washington these days. The triple disaster of 3/11, March 11, 2011, the earthquake, tsunami, and meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, which is the worst crisis confronting Japan since the Second World War, tragically, as tragic as that is, has reawakened, I think, interest in Japan among Americans. And as the Consul General mentioned, the outpouring of support for Japan from the United States has shown, I think, that Americans do in fact care deeply about Japan and do recognize the importance of the U.S.-Japan relationship. And the efforts that the Consul General mentioned of so many, including the Japan-America Society of Southern California, for example, to raise funds for relief for those who are most impacted by the tragedy, are a demonstration of the importance that's attached to Japan and U.S.-Japan relations by Americans. And also Operation Tomodachi is certainly another similarly important manifestation of the depth of the bilateral relationship. As the Consul General mentioned, with the more than 20,000 American U.S. military personnel working together with more than 100,000 Japanese self-defense forces, Operation Tomodachi constituted the largest joint and combined operation in the history of the U.S.-Japan alliance. Now, relief and rebuilding efforts will go on for some time, but there is some hope that out of the tragedy of 3/11, it will serve as something of a catalyst for renewal in Japan, helping return that country to a path of greater prosperity and growth. And there's hope, for example, that rebuilding will provide impetus to a new wave of innovation in sectors such as energy and other sectors. And a number of firms are already exceeding expectations in terms of getting their operations back up to significant levels. Toyota, for example, this month expects to be at 90% of pre-disaster capacity. That said, Japan does face a number of daunting challenges. It has enormous public debt, 220% of GDP, suffers from periodic bouts of deflation, and it has the world's oldest population. It also suffers, I'm afraid, from political instability, ongoing lack of political leadership, which may hinder some of the relief efforts. At the same time, we must remember that Japan remains the world's third largest economy, second largest contributor to the World Bank, IMF, United Nations, and Afghan and Iraqi reconstruction. The country also is at the cutting edge of any number of technologies and is highly respected around the world. And it is America's most important ally and partner in the Asia-Pacific region, which in and of itself is the world's most dynamic. And so today we've assembled what I really think is a terrific group of panelists to talk about some of these issues, the impact on Southern California of Japan, but also some of the broader aspects of the U.S.-Japan relationship. We're going to kick off today with Dr. Satu Limaye, who's the director of the East-West Center in Washington. He's been in that position since 2007. Before then, he was with the Institute for Defense Analysis and a director of the Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies, which is based in Honolulu. He was also an Abe Fellow and a Luce Scholar and head of programs on South Asian affairs at the Japan Institute for International Affairs in Tokyo. Satu is also the director of the Japan Matters for America, America Matters for Japan project. Our second speaker is William McMorrow, who is chairman and chief executive officer of Kennedy Wilson, which is a major real estate agency with 23 offices in the United States, Japan, and Europe, 300 employees, about 150 of whom are Japanese nationals. Kennedy Wilson, in November of 2009, went public and is now listed on the New York Stock Exchange with a market capitalization of about $1 billion. And he has been working in Japan since 1994, when he opened his first office in Tokyo. And in 2003, KWJ, as it's known, was listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. And then even more recently, 2005, he formed a new private multifamily company in Japan, which now has assets of about $600 million. Next speaker is Kappei Morishita, who is the general manager of Media and Content Alliance Office at the Panasonic Corporation, as well as the Blu-ray license group at Panasonic's Hollywood Laboratory. He's been with Panasonic since 1985 in various management positions in television, international relations, law, and mergers and acquisitions. And his current role includes licensing office for Blu-ray Disc Association, and responsible for worldwide format and logo licenses, and is a board member, finance committee chair of the International 3D Society, which is headquartered in Los Angeles and expanding to Japan, China, Korea, and European countries. He is also he's been a member of the Japan America Society of Southern California for nearly 14 years, and now is co-vice chair of the Society's board of directors. Dr. Ed Lincoln is director of the Center for Japan, U.S. Business and Economic Studies at the New York University Stern School of Business. He's also clinical professor of economics there, and his research interests include contemporary structure and change in the Japanese economy, East Asian economic interests and U.S. economic policy toward Japan and East Asia. He's the author of numerous books, including one called Japan Facing Economic Maturity, which won the Masayoshi Ohira Award for Outstanding Books on the Asia-Pacific region. Previously, he was a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, as well as the Brookings Institution, and he served as special economic advisor to Ambassador Walter Mondale at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo in the 1990s. Our final speaker will be Dr. Nancy Sidhu, who is Vice President and Chief Economist at the Kaiser Center for Economic Research at the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. And in that capacity, she analyzes and prepares forecasts of national, regional, and industrial trends for the Economic Development Corporation's publications and is a frequent media commentator. She's also previously been a senior economist for Bank of America, specializing in the analysis of Southern California's region, as well as several particular industries. And when she moved here to Los Angeles, she started out with the Planning Administration Department of Toyota Motor Sales USA. She also chairs the Economic Advisory Council of the California Chamber of Commerce and is an associate editor of the quarterly publication Business Economics, and has served terms as president of the Chicago and Los Angeles chapters of the National Association of Business Economics. So we have a wonderful group of panelists today who can talk about the U.S.-Japan relationship, both from the broadest sense down to the particular impact that Japan has on Southern California's economy. With that, I'd like to turn the mic over to our first speaker, Dr. Satu Limaye.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, and I thank the Japan-America Society of Southern California and Sasakawa Foundation. Nancy was telling me that a lot of people like to come here in January, but if you're from Washington, D.C., where the heat index, I should say swamp and humidity index, is about 110 degrees, you're happy to come here in June as well. So I am a pleasure to join you, and I can't think of a better place to kick off our American side of the rollout for the Japan Matters for America project. We, last November, rolled this project out across several cities in Japan in cooperation with the Japan Center for International Exchange and, of course, the Sasakawa Foundation in Tokyo. Consul General Ihara mentioned the usability of this product, or I should say. And so what I wanted to do before people go into very specific discussions of macroeconomic issues in Japan and U.S.-Japan relations, as well as issues related to Southern California, is to tell you what this project is and why we did it, because I think that will give some indication of why we did it in the manner we did it. The first thing I think I should say is that this brochure also comes with an associated website of the same title, which is accessible to anyone. There's no subscription, it's free. And it is constantly updated with new information, reports, and developments on U.S.-Japan relations. So, for example, after the horrible tragedy of March 11th, there's information on how the incident and the particularly affected region impacted on U.S.-Japan relations, for example. So we keep an ongoing blog, as it were, on the U.S.-Japan relationship. The second thing I should say is that the Japan Matters for America project is part of a much larger initiative called Asia Matters for America. And that's really kind of where my story begins. As Dan alluded to, I spent the last 15 years of my life working for the U.S. Defense Department in various capacities. I'm posted out at U.S. Pacific Command in Honolulu. And when I came back to Washington after many years of being away, I realized in some ways how far and distant Asia was from the day-to-day sort of considerations of Washington. Though many functional issues